In this episode, we are discussing the biggest turnoffs in friendships. So here we go. Welcome to Accidentally Intentional, where we are on a mission to destroy loneliness by building rich, meaningful friendships. And obviously, I keep thinking of Jimmy Fallon's Ew skit as I keep going through this episode, hence why I thought it would be funny to put the thumbnail as that. But let's be honest. There are marks of a bad friend, and there are marks of a friend that are red flags. And then there are just marks of a friend where you're just plain grossed out. Like, I can't believe someone would do that. That's such a turnoff. It's so repulsive. Now, it can be on varying degrees, right? But at the same time, I think they're worth talking about because, honestly, one of the worst turnoffs is us being the friend that does any of these things, because not only is it hypocritical, but it's crazy for us to have an expectation for someone to be something that we aren't trying to become ourselves. So let's just go into these with this lens of, hey, I want to self-reflect also and make sure that I'm not the friend that does any of these things. And if I am, then I'm going to work on changing it effective today. And don't worry, we can all fall into these occasionally and hopefully rarely, but the goal is we don't want to consistently show up as this type of friend, and we certainly don't want these types of friends in our lives. So I'm going to go through 7 things, the biggest turnoffs in friendship. The first one is being someone that isn't reliable. You know, the friend who you make plans with and then they show up 24 minutes late. The friend who you need something from, needs different than wants, right? Not always when you want them, but when you actually need them, they're not there for you. The friend who you shared kind of your expectations with and they just ignore it. And you're like, well, that's not important to me. Now, all of these have caveats, right? If you are a friend that does show up and does do what you say you're going to do, yet someone expects more of that and almost expects you to be their life, then obviously that's not healthy and that's also a turnoff. But I'm talking about people who just simply, on a reliable basis, aren't reliable. The people that consistently aren't doing what they say they're going to do. So lack of reliability, that's an ew for us. That's an ew, that's a turnoff. Number 2 is someone that doesn't ask you questions. Now, there are caveats to this too, because I used to be the type of person who was just so interested in what somebody had to say that they couldn't fit a question in to ask me because I'd be like right on top of it, asking another question. And then I learned, actually, that is not helpful either if I'm not giving someone the space and opportunity to ask me questions. But I think we can tell, right? Is if someone answers a question and then just looks at you back, ready for you to ask another question and not asking you one and opening up a dialogue, that's a turnoff, because if you can't have conversations with people, then you can't get vulnerable with people. And if you can't get vulnerable with people, then you can't have a deep, meaningful friendship, because it hinges on being fully seen, fully known, and in spite of that, being fully loved. So someone that doesn't ask questions about you, not good. Friendship turnoff. Number 3, someone who doesn't actually listen to you when you're talking or take an interest in what you're saying. This is an interesting one because there's obviously caveats to it as well. But if you're trying to get to know somebody or have a friendship, what's the harm in taking an interest in what they're interested in? I'm not saying become obsessed. I'm not saying make it your thing, but have a genuine interest in the people in the world around you. Because if you're showing disinterest and you're not actively listening and you're just trying to go through it and get back to talking about yourself, then nobody wants that friend. I certainly don't want that friend. I'm sure you don't either, nor do we want to be that type of friend. Number 4 is someone who doesn't support you, especially after you share something that would mean a lot to you to support them. And I say that with that caveat because so many times we create these stories and we're like, oh my God, they don't support me. But it's like, did you share with somebody exactly what you were hoping to have their support in? Because we can't read each other's minds. And I've definitely been guilty of this, right? I'm just like, how you didn't show up for me. They're like, first off, I didn't show up for you because I didn't know you had a thing. You didn't tell me it would mean something to you. And it's not dumbing something down by needing to tell someone, hey, this would mean a lot to me. It's so silly when we tell ourselves like, they should know. No, they shouldn't know. In any relationship of any sort, nobody should know what's on your heart and in your mind unless you tell them. So let's not set that expectation for others because we certainly don't want that expectation of a guessing game put on us. So the turnoff here is someone that doesn't support you when you've told them what would mean a lot to you when it comes to support. Because when you're not supporting somebody and when you are in that camp, what you're saying is, I hear you and that's not important to me. Therefore, I'm not going to prioritize it because what's important to you does not align with what's important to me. And that's support. Here's a big one. Number 5, treating others differently than themselves if they have a different social status, etc. I mean, that is one of the worst things because we pay attention to how people treat others, right? And it's such a bad thing when we're watching how someone treats others and it's actually not equal. Like there's definitely favoritism and based on, like if there's a waiter, if they're suddenly rude to the waiter, but then the snap back to like, anyways, how are you? That is weird and that's like a red flag because that nobody should be treated higher or elevated or better than anybody else, ultimately. And if they're doing it to somebody else, hello, they're going to do it to you. They're going to do it to me. So we need to be mindful of that because if you are treating people differently and not equally, yuck, ew, big friendship turnoff. But of course, if they're kind to everyone, then that is a good friend. You might be watching this video or listening to this episode thinking to yourself, man, I really like where we're going with this, but ultimately, I don't really know where to even start when it comes to building rich friendships or getting out of my rut of loneliness. And if that's you, I got you. Because now we have a free downloadable guide, which is the 5 steps you need to build rich friendships. It's the springboard that launches you into every other facet of your life in your own mission to destroy your loneliness. It's the exact steps that I, along with now hundreds of others, have used to destroy their loneliness and build the friendships that they've always dreamed of and always wanted. And now it could be your turn too. So make sure you check out the link in the description or the show notes to download that guide for free right now. 5 steps to build rich friendships. Hey, by the way, I think you're worth it. Back to the show. All right, here's another one. People who cling hard and fast. Now, this has some nuance to it because there's a difference between meeting somebody and following up and being like, hey, it was awesome to meet you today. Like, can't wait for more adventures to come. There's a difference between that and saying, hey, loved meeting you. Want to hang out tomorrow? Want to hang out the next day? When are you available? That's obviously terrifying because you're like, holy cow, what does this person think I am? Do they just think I can be available all the time? It's stressful, it's irritating, and it sets both of you up for failure. So people that rush into friendship and are almost giving off this vibe of, I am so desperately needing you in my life because I'm just trying to find a friend and like, you're here, you're available. We need to be cautious of that. And it's an interesting dichotomy, right? Because we're either thinking like, hey, I need you. And it's good to need people, but not to fill everything. And then on the other hand, we tell ourselves like, oh, like I can't tell people they need me. Like, so how do we balance that, right? Well, think about how you would want to be treated. You would want to be the friend that wants to be needed, but you don't want to be the friend that is needed all the time. We want to be the friends and we want to have friends who aren't looking for us to fix and solve all their problems and all the holes and gaps in their heart that they have and their singular need for connection, because we need people. Not we need one person, we need people in our lives. I would say another friendship turnoff is the balance of trust. Now, what I'm not saying is this tit for tat situation where it's like, well, they said this, so I'm going to say this, or they did this, that right there, that's a turnoff of someone trying to keep score in a friendship. Yuck. But what I'm also talking about is, has someone earned your trust? And have they given you the opportunity to earn theirs? Now, it's a turnoff when someone doesn't share anything kind of about them, because when you don't share anything about yourself with some small level of vulnerability, you're cutting off opportunities for someone to walk alongside you in life as a friend. Because if they don't know you, how can they know you enough to be the friend that you're looking for, you know? So it's kind of that thought process that I have on this one. So earning trust, it's a turnoff when someone doesn't want to tell you anything. And also it's a turnoff when someone just thinks they know everything about you, when you're thinking, wait, I mean, I haven't shared that with you. Like, you're just kind of making assumptions. I think that's what it is, right? It's based on someone that makes assumptions instead of earning your trust and actually seeking to know you. So that was a mouthful, and I kind of went all over the place, but I hope you catch my drift on that one. Another friendship turnoff, and the final one we'll address in this episode, is someone who doesn't care about your well-being at all. No, I'm not saying a friend that's like super dangerous, but I'm saying someone who, when, let's say you're an introvert and you don't need weeks or months to recover. Let's not go overboard, but you do need a couple days. Someone who's like, no, I don't see why you need that. Like, I feel like you're not making me a priority. That's an example of a friend who doesn't care about your well-being, because incredible friends are the ones that want to make sure that you are on your A game and they're on their A game, and they're not expecting you to be the one that make them on their A game. If they're dependent on you fully and all the time, then ultimately they're not caring about your well-being. And if you're like, oh my gosh, I have a friend like this right now, turn off, well, hang on, before you're like ending the friendship, there's an opportunity for a conversation to say, hey, I've been reflecting and this would mean a lot to me, and kind of setting some boundaries. And they get to decide from there whether they're going to choose to respect that or not. But all boundaries, or all friendships and relationships, have boundaries to some degree, because boundaries are what divides and shows what's yours versus someone else's, like a fence. So someone who respects boundaries is someone that's committed to your well-being. But someone that makes everything about themselves as a detriment to you, or regardless of how you're feeling, doing, caring, or at your expense, that is not a good friend. And that is a friendship turnoff. Now, obviously, there's probably a lot more we can list, so why don't we address them in the comments? Give me some friendship turnoffs for you. And also would love to see if somebody in here did and participated in one of these friendship turnoffs, what you learned from it, and how you're fixing it moving forward. Because I know that I've been guilty of quite a lot of these. I used to be the friend that was always late. Like, I became known as the friend that was always late. That's so sad, because when I'm late to things, I'm essentially and effectively saying, you don't mean enough to me to make this a priority to be on time. I used to be the friend that asked too many questions and didn't let people ask me questions. I used to be the friend that wasn't always the most supportive of others. And like, I knew they had something and I just didn't show up because I was tired of something. I made excuses. I used to be that friend. And I realized that's so harmful, because I don't want that friend in my life. I used to be the friend that honestly would just cling on to a friend for dear life, and it ended up coming to my detriment and ended up ending the friendship, because I put all my eggs in one basket thinking that one friend could do and be everything. So listen, I'm telling you firsthand, I'm guilty of so many of these. And through the years, I've learned what needs to happen and what I hope to see in my friendships. And I hope that this episode has helped you reflect and do the same.